a lot of people have been leaving the Roman Catholic Church. There's been a massive crisis in the Roman Catholic Church. And I'm going to show you guys an article in a little bit here, but there was a study that was recently done. It was published, an article was done on the results of the study, and they were published on Crisis Magazine, which is a Catholic publication. But the article said that for every 100 people that are staying in the Catholic Church, 800 people are leaving the Catholic Church. 800 people. Let that sink into your brain. For every 100 people who are dedicated to the Roman Catholic Church, 800 are leaving. And where are they going? Oh, I don't know. They're going to atheism. They're going into Protestantism. They're going to maybe some weird New Age Buddhism. And they're going into the ranks of the Eastern Orthodox Church. And there has been a massive wave of conversions, especially in the United States, towards the Eastern Orthodox world, the Eastern Orthodox Church. To reference Jay Dyer, Pope Francis was the greatest thing to have ever happened to Eastern Orthodoxy in a very long time, because of the fact that so many people left the Roman Catholic Church to join the Orthodox Church when he was the Pope, when he was in the chair of St. Peter. Apparently, the Vatican doesn't give a shit about maintaining its body. Apparently, it doesn't really give a shit about going back to its roots, being actually true to what Catholicism is. Apparently, it's just a sinking ship. Do you know what the Roman Catholic Church is like? The Roman Catholic Church is the ship that St. Paul rode on in the book of Acts. Oh, we're going to get into some interesting territory here, guys. We're going to get into some interesting territory here. Very interesting. So if you go to the book of Acts, there is a story in which St. Paul is desirous of going to Rome, or he has an objective to go to Rome. And why does he want to go to Rome? Because he wants to attend the Roman Church. Why else was he going to Rome? He was going to Rome to attend the Roman Church, the Roman Catholic Church. Yes, the Roman Catholic Church is thousands of years old. It's very ancient. It goes back to Jesus Christ. It goes back to St. Peter and St. Paul. St. Peter and Paul, they were bishops of the Roman Church. That's why if you read Tertullian, he refers to bishops Peter and Paul when he speaks of the Roman Church. So here's St. Paul. He wants to go to Rome. So he gets on a ship. And the ship makes a stop somewhere. I think it stopped in somewhere in Cyprus, somewhere in the Greek Isles. And then he gets on another ship, and they sail out. They're heading towards Rome, everyone. And then what happens? A strong gust of wind comes and hits the ship. And the people on the ship are starving. They have not eaten anything in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, they did not eat anything. So they were on the verge of dying from starvation. The winds are so strong, the ship is bound to be destroyed by this very vicious and violent torrent. So what happens? Well, the man who was running the ship, the man who was leading the ship, he said, well, there are some prisoners here on the ship. Let's just throw them out of the ship. And St. Paul says, no, don't throw them out. Mercy. Mercy. And there are some men who want to escape the ship. The book of Acts tells us that there were some men who wanted to escape the ship. And so they got on a little boat, a little escape boat, and they were lowering the little boat to the water. And the captain of the ship, or the man who was running the ship, he told the men who were about to escape, he said, get back on the ship, because Paul says that in order for everyone to survive, everyone must be on the ship. So they get back on the ship. And the ship is on the verge of crashing. The ship is on the verge of being destroyed by this gust of wind. And St. Paul picks up a giant loaf of bread that he had been keeping. And he raised it up. And he said, "Eat so that you may live." And everyone on the ship took a little portion of the loaf of bread. And they ate. And then eventually the ship was destroyed. It crashed and it fragmented into multiple pieces of wood. And those who could swim, swam. But those who could not swim hanged on to whatever wood, driftwood, they could latch onto, to whatever pieces of wood they could cling onto. That's the Roman Church. The Roman Church is on its way to just crashing. It's on its way to just sinking like that ship. Because who was Paul? Paul was what? He was one of the leaders of the Roman Church. Now, I know a lot of Roman Catholics will become sticklers over this issue, and they will say, no, it was only St. Peter, but St. Paul is mentioned as a bishop by the early Christians, a bishop of the Roman Church. So he was a leader of the Roman Catholic Church. He was a bishop. And he was in this ship, and the ship was heading towards where? Rome. And what happens? It crashes. The ship that is heading towards Rome is crashing. And who was on the ship? A bishop of the Roman Church. And he leads everyone to their own salvation. He gives them the bread of life, which is the Eucharist, so that they will not starve. That bread that he gave them, that represents the Eucharist, because everything in the New Testament has a spiritual significance. Everything. Everything has a spiritual significance. And so the bread represented what? The Eucharist. And Paul represents who? The church. And the ship represents what? The church. Because the church is referred to as what? The ark. If you read, for example, St. Jerome. St. Jerome calls the Roman Church the ark. And he says, if you are not in the ark, you will not survive. If you are not in the ark, you will not survive. This is what St. Jerome says about the Roman Church. And what happened? There were people who wanted to escape the ark. And Paul says what? If you guys don't get in here, we're all going to die. So in order for us to live, you have to be in here, or else we're all going to die. And then the ship crashes. The ship eventually crashes. I think that story is very prophetic. I think that it is a prophecy for the sinking of the Roman ark, the sinking of the Roman ship. And just as the Jewish temple did horrendously reckless things that led to its demise, like crucifying the Messiah, the Roman Church is continuously treading on a path to its own demise. I know Roman Catholics will sit there and disagree with me, but it's the truth. The Roman Catholic Church is going down the road of the Jewish temple.